Thank you for joining us. This is Live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. Special guest today is Amanda Prieto from Save Calusa. Welcome, and thank you for coming here.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
So you're very active out in West Kendall and in some other areas as well, but today we're going to be talking about the old Calusa golf course and some of the things that you've been working on. And people can find you at savecalusa.org.
That's it.
And we're going to show some pictures a little bit later. So why don't you tell us currently what's going on, and then we'll go back.
Sure. So it all kind of started, it's 168 acres in West Kendall in Calusa. And right now there's a proposed development plan to build 540 homes. So this has been ongoing in our community for decades now. And one thing that the residents have been fighting for is greater habitat protection for the wildlife that are currently using this space. The golf course itself has been closed since 2011. So it's been green space for, well over 10 years.
So let's flip back years ago. They had, how many homes were they going to put on that property?
1,100. There were some townhomes and single family. Yes.
So one of the things you discovered as they were trying to muscle everybody around is they had a little moat, and now called a rookery. Do I have that right?
There's a lake on the southern side with a tree island in the middle. And what we noticed was that birds were using it for nesting. And when the owner did their environmental survey, they said, nothing to worry about here. We're going to fill in the lake and the birds will find somewhere else to live. And so what we did was we documented the species in hopes of finding something worth preserving. And that's in fact what happened. We found this state-threatened tricolored heron was nesting there, and there are some regulations on preservation.
Let's see, can we pull up some pictures of the tricolored heron? They're going to be up in a second. So there it is right there.
There it is.
Right. So when was this picture taken?
So I don't have the exact year on this, but we've been documenting the species since 2020. And every year we've seen tricolored heron nesting.
And that's state protected?
That's state threatened, yes. Right.
So at the time when the development was in front of the county commission, at some point the government officials said, if there is animals need to be protected, we're not going to grant what they wanted. Do I have that right?
So actually they approved at the zoning hearing, they approved the 550 homes, and you'll probably remember Ron McGill stood up and made a fuss, and we were all over the news everywhere saying this isn't right, we need more surveys. And it was actually Mayor Cava that stepped in and said, we will do independent surveys and we will verify if the state threatened tricolored heron is there, and if it is, we will preserve it. So she's really the one that took, positive action in this case.
Right. So, and you must clearly have a gigantic book of photos. It must be magnificent.
Lots of photos.
It must be really significant to see where you had this idea and said, let's see what happens. But you started documenting it. That's what made the difference.
Yes.
Started doing those pictures. All right. You weren't trespassing on their property or in somebody's home, I guess.
We have access from actually private residences from their backyard. So right. There's a home that's as close as 30 feet to the rookery. So that's where we primarily go.
So explain again what a rookery is, so people get.
It's a tree island where birds can go to just rest at night and sleep, but they really seek sanctuary, especially amid all the traffic and chaos in West Kendall. It's really just a beautiful, peaceful, tranquil place where they can also forage for food and where nesting can occur. So during nesting season, there are hundreds of nests in this tree island.
And it is very quiet out there.
Very.
And they're here, the critters are out there having a good
beautiful
time. So years ago, the reason it came up is because there used to be a homeowners association. If they lived on the ring, that's what it was called. They had to get a huge percentage of people to agree that it could be converted from a golf course to something else.
Exactly. It was originally intended to be a golf course indefinitely. And what they did was they had a land use covenant. And the land use covenant was for 99 years. And to release the covenant, they needed 75% of the homes that lived on the ring, which are just the homes that backed onto the golf course. But of course, there are thousands of other people that live in Calusa that didn't get a say in that decision. And unfortunately, there was also a lot of money involved. There was a financial settlement, we think around 22 million. And so each individual homeowner that signed to release that covenant that protected our community received up to $300,000. And that's just not how zoning decisions should be made.
And so a couple of years ago, it sort of went into abeyance. It sort of went away, it seems like, but it's back.
Well, it was stuck in court. So we filed action in 2021, legal action. And at that time, the Mayor Cava had also asked Durham to go and do independent surveys. So both things were happening at once. So we were happy that we had a little bit of extra time for them to confirm the nesting, which they did within a year. But at the same time, the public notice for the original hearing was also a point of contention. We felt like it didn't meet the requirements and wasn't sufficient.
Oh, yes.
And of course, if the notice isn't sufficient, then residents don't know to show up. And that was a really big point of contention for us because we wanted residents to show up and we were really worried. So we told them, hey, we don't think notice is sufficient here. Please redo it. And they felt it was sufficient. So it went through, 11th Circuit, it went through 3rd DCA, went all the way to Florida Supreme Court, and we won.
And who's your attorney?
David Winker.
There you go, David Winker.
Lots of love for David Winker, yes. So all the way.
What they said, the court agreed with you that the
Yes.
notice to the public
Yes.
is not sufficient.
Right. And so
and what was insufficient about it?
they didn't put it in the newspaper.
Oops. And I know the county defended itself, saying no, they didn't need to.
Yes.
So on a connected note, years ago, not too many, the county changed the notification rules.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be people would, in the immediate neighborhood would get postcards. It
Yes.
was a change. They reduced the size of that. And there were some other changes as well, which made it harder for neighbors to know. It was almost as though the developers did it to reduce the number of people that could find it.
It's hard enough for residents to go all the way downtown and you get 1 to 2 minutes to speak and to voice all of your concerns, especially in our case where it's literally decades of concerns and things change. And because it's zoning, you're not allowed to talk to your commissioner. And because we're an unincorporated Miami-Dade, we have one commissioner that represents us and we can't speak with her. So it's really challenging and difficult to have the voice of the community represented.
So now the developer wants to build the 500 and some odd homes. What's the process from today forward?
So because we won in court, they have to repeat the zoning application and approval process. So they have to go back to the County Board of Commissioners and ask again with this new plan that also now has to preserve the rookery.
So for the 500 homes or so.
So instead of 550, they're now proposing 540. Not a significant change in my personal opinion. I have some big concerns with their, proposed plan. They're reducing the size of the lake around the rookery. They have homes really close to it. I'm just really concerned that it's set up to fail.
So when is it? And it's almost a brand new commission.
It is almost since the last vote. It is absolutely more than half of a new commission. Yes.
And it was that commission back when that approved it.
Yes.
That ultimately they approved it because at some point the government agency said, "Oh, it was okay."
Well, they didn't realize at the time that there was, nesting, and the developer submitted their entire environmental report saying there wasn't any nesting. So at that point, it was really my word against theirs. So we do appreciate that Mayor Cava stepped in and said, "Okay, we will do our own independent surveys and verify what's going on," which was, I think, a very smart decision.
Alex, could you put up their website so we can take a look at it? So they were going to right here again.
There's
so
the rookery.
All right. And what's the size of that?
It's 0.3 of an acre. It's not huge. It's a couple trees on an island in the middle of a lake. But as you can see during nesting season, it houses hundreds of nests.
Let's flip through a couple more pictures if you have them on that sheet there.
And I have a wonderful local photographer that helps.
What's his name?
Dennis Horn.
Way to go,
and
Dennis.
His wife, Vicki. Thank you so much. And so here, we try to document the species. We also try to document when there's, nesting and eggs. We count the eggs each year. There's 2 of our, juveniles or 2 tricolored heron that nested
those
and
are ones
hatched.
that are protected by the state of Florida.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Did you say, "I've been waiting for you"?
It's fantastic. It's, we see there's a little baby tricolored heron. I think Ron McGill took that one. That was great. I think this is really important. It's a rare rookery. There are not that many active rookeries in Miami-Dade outside of the Everglades. And we see new and different species every year.
Hold it right there. What are the 2 one on the left?
The white right there,
Yep.
Those are great egrets.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we see those around, no?
Yeah, and you can see the one right below it with the breeding plumage all fanned out there, just gorgeous.
Okay.
And Anhinga on the right. I've learned a lot about wading birds. There's a snail kite. We saw those are endangered federally, and we saw one the other day last week.
Oh, they must
put up
love
new
you.
pictures. Yeah. No, it's exciting. It's the way habitat should be. It's peaceful and quiet for all the birds.
Thank you, Alex. So how long you been involved with this?
About 5 years.
So 5.5 years ago, did you think, well, maybe one day I'm going to become an advocate for creatures like this?
Never in a million years. No, it really was a timing situation. I heard about it on Nextdoor. Neighbors were talking about this big deal that was made and development. And I went, that's really close to my home, within 500 feet, actually. I should pay attention to this. And I was new to Miami and didn't know about how these decisions were made and started asking questions. And then COVID hit. And, my work hours were diminished. And this gave me kind of an outlet of, I'm going to focus on something good for my community and the environment and learn. And I had a little extra time to do it. And so it was really good timing for me.
So, and you did well at it, because it wasn't the facts up front. It was the belief in yourself that something could happen. And you allowed that to happen.
I truly believe that people can make a difference, right? Like in the power of community. And we had, thousands of people. We had over 6,000 people sign a petition within 10 days. Just people cared, right? And if it can happen here in Calusa, it can happen anywhere in the county. And I think it brought awareness, as we made successive wins, as we won in court, as the birds were confirmed to be there, that we could make a difference in this process and that it mattered that we were.
Where does that come from within you?
I don't know. I think that's how I was raised. I'm originally from Canada. I'll give my parents some credit. But
Way to go, Mom.
Yes,
way to go, Dad.
Thank you. But I think, your values and beliefs matter. And I didn't know if I could win. I didn't know if I could stop it, but I felt strongly I could make it better and that it was important.
And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen.
I hope so.
You're holding their feet to the fire to come up with something that works for everyone.
That's the goal. I think, one of the problems with them building these homes is that there's no community benefit. And I would love to see a park or preserve where both the wildlife, has a benefit, local residents have a benefit, and it ultimately reduces the density, which reduces all the traffic and schools and other impacts.
What's the price range going to be of those homes?
These are luxury gated over $1 million homes. So I know we're in a housing crisis. I actually supported, even though it's somewhat controversial in my community, the very nearby, just down the street, apartment buildings that went up on the old strawberry field, because that's on the transit way. There was no land use covenant. It was zoned for townhomes. It was higher density. They gave me a 1 acre park. It just made more sense. I would prefer strawberry field, but that made sense in terms of housing. To me, the golf course doesn't make sense.
And the elementary school is right there.
It's right in the middle of the two developments.
Yep.
Yes. And my kids go to this school. It matters to me what gets built in this community.
Doesn't Baptist have some property around there?
Actually, the Strawberry Fields is partially owned by Baptist, yes. And they're going to have a facility.
Oh, they haven't started that facility
They haven't
yet.
started. It's going to be in the back of the apartment buildings. They weren't sure if it was going to be a walk-in clinic or just offices. So I need to follow up on that.
So what do you folks think about all this, being so rambunctious?
I think I've always been rambunctious. I think I've always loved nature. I grew up on the east coast of Canada, next to the highest tides in the world. It was really just kind of ingrained in what we did on a day-to-day basis. And I just really enjoy it and see the value in preserving it.
So Amanda, let's look out 5 years. Where are you? What are you doing?
I've turned this into a career now, so I get paid. This was all volunteer, and I really enjoy it, and I'm going to continue until the end. But now I work for a nonprofit that does advocacy to, protect clean water and habitat. So still closely related to my wading birds, and I really enjoy it.
So I mentioned you earlier, my children, my grandchildren live on the waterway, and there's manatees. So they're with the kayaks and the paddleboard, going up and down, looking at the manatees. And the other day, my grandson holds up a little plastic bag. Grandpa, I found some trash. And when you see that you can make a difference like that, it's because of people like you, that he was there, he understood. You don't want the manatees eating
Exactly.
that. And they live on the waterway, so they see all that stuff. So here it is. It managed somehow to get through.
Yep.
Right? And he was proud to be able to do that. I couldn't quite figure out what he was saying when it got close enough. I went, oh my God, he plucked it. Look, Dad, look, Grandpa, look what we're doing. So you have a career now, paid career with a nonprofit, watching out for all of us. That's wonderful.
I love it. I enjoy it.
And so has the organization had a conversation yet about the non-incinerator for Miami-Dade County?
We came out with a statement saying we really didn't want it to impede Everglades restoration. And so rather than, because we are very much focused on water and clean waterways, rather than come out pro or against an incinerator, we really focused on the available properties that they were considering.
And part of this is you fight the battles you can fight. Right. And the things that you can be effective in that. Speaking of that, we saw Meg Daly this morning.
Oh, yes. Yeah, wonderful. The underline.
Yes. And it was like, wow. And I'd never met her before. All right. I've seen plenty of pictures. I've seen plenty of interviews. And so we know that Miami-Dade County has to be a little more aware of what we do because of our position being a peninsula out here, all the different waterways and all the water, all the extra water that we get from down here. So what do your children, your two young children, think about what mom does?
If you ask them, they say I save the birds and the manatees. They just merge it all together, which is fine. But I do think that they see that I stood up for something that I believed in. And, I've taken them. They've seen the birds. They've definitely learned a lot. Sometimes we go to the zoo and they're like, hey, Mom, there's a snowy egret or a tricolored heron. Or, we went to the Everglades. And they do enjoy nature, which, I'm happy to pass along that love to them. So I hope that they see that I made a difference.
So speaking of making a difference, we're looking at the Everglades with all those pythons out there eating all the critters. That whole evolution, I'm not quite sure how it's going to end, but I understand the biologists no longer take accounts of four-legged.
There's too many to count, I think, is where we're at. They have the hunts every year. It's really problematic when you have an invasive like that takes over and adapts, and then you don't have a natural predator, and then it starts to impact all the local species. So it's a big problem.
And we see people say, why does it affect the hawks? Because the hawks eat the rabbits that are down there, and the rabbits are not there.
Whole ecosystem, yeah.
So, and what do your friends and your neighbors, when they talk to you about your advocacy, what do they say to you?
I mean, I think in this case, I like to use the term, it was literally David versus Goliath, because I had David Winker working with me on my side, but we were against a really big developer, GL Homes, and this, land is privately owned in part by Facundo Bacardi. So the biggest names, the biggest lobbyists, the biggest, pocketbooks. And it was just me and my closest neighbors and, residents in Calusa. And so it was a hard decision to make. Can we fight this, which is why we very much stuck to the facts and tried to not attack anybody, but just say and focus on the importance of preserving the habitat and the impacts for residents.
What keeps fueling you?
I mean, at this point, we have two big wins. So I already feel like we've made a difference. We bought enough time for the tricolored heron to be verified and now a requirement that it be protected. And we won in court. And so I feel a little validated. At one point in the court documents, I was called a disgruntled neighbor with an alter ego. And I think I should make my own T-shirt that says that with the wins next to it, like when the birds were confirmed and when we won at Florida Supreme Court.
The other side.
I guess so. Yes. Yeah. So in the court documents. So I think that now I've earned some respect and have, my original claims have all proven to be true. The birds are there. The notice was invalid. And what I really hope comes through is that the voice of the residents matter. And that is very difficult in our current zoning process. And I would like to, work with the county in a way that just makes that process easier for the county and for residents. There are lots of people with lots of opinions in Calusa on how to make this better. And the people that were paid shouldn't be the only ones with a voice in the process.
So at some point, they're going to be essentially going to comply, I assume, with whatever rules are floating around at that particular, and then the county commission is going to vote on it.
Right.
And then whatever it's going to be, it'll be something that they've earned, that they have the right to that, as long as they can keep those, protect those critters.
Right. They have a right to build. It's privately owned, but within a certain framework, right? They have to do notice properly, and residents' quality of life has to be maintained, and the wildlife is also protected. So there are some ways to make this development better. And that's the ultimate goal here is I think that eventually they will build something here. I hope that there's a community benefit and a park or preserve around the rookery that preserves that habitat.
All right, GL Homes, you got that?
Open to talking.
Right. So there you are, home with your kids, and your husband's there, and he's cooking dinner for you. So what's that conversation like? So what'd you do today, Amanda?
I mean, I love talking about these birds. I will talk about it to anybody who listens. We have a new neighbor that kind of moved in, and I was telling the whole story, start to finish, and it is an amazing story.
When are you going to sort of document this so you can say, here's the beginning and here is the end conclusion in 2020, whatever?
I guess when we get to the end, when something is approved or shovels hit the ground, whatever that stage is, hopefully it's when a park or preserve is there. They can call it Bacardi Preserve if they want. Bacardi, Heron Preserve or something wonderful, and I will shake their hand and give them credit for doing the right thing.
Well, I hope you do preserve your journey, because it's very important, not just for you and not just for your family, but for this bigger picture about citizens advocacy and how important that is that they be heard. Because at the end of the day, people either have to speak up or regret not speaking up. So I'm glad you speak up. Amanda Prieto, thank you for everything.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific. Thanks for being here. We're going to look right over here.
Okay.
And hey, folks, again, thanks for watching. Remember, take care of yourselves and your family. Have a good day. Bye now.